Orchestrated new story framework with fresh characters and logical plot mechanics. Orchestrated new story framework with fresh characters and logical plot mechanics. The first time I heard it, I genuinely thought my phone was glitching, because the woman talking didn't sound like my best friend at all. She sounded like a stranger who happened to have Tessa's voice and none of Tessa's armor. And by the time I understood that the stranger and the best friend were the same person, I'd already heard the one sentence she had spent 6 years making sure I never would, if she'd reached over and ended the call the way she thought she had. If I'd set my own phone down instead of standing there in my socks like the world's slowest idiot. If her friend hadn't been sitting right there in her kitchen that night, any one of those things goes differently, and I'm still the guy who calls his best friend after bad dates and never once wonders why none of those dates ever stick. But none of them went differently. So here we are. Her name was Tessa, and she ran a bakery on a corner in Denver that smelled, depending on the hour, like either cardamom or burned sugar. And she'd been the closest person in my life for almost 6 years. Long enough that I knew she took her coffee black until 2 in the afternoon and then suddenly, inexplicably, with enough cream to turn it the color of a manila folder. Long enough that I could tell from the first word out of her mouth whether she was actually fine or just saying it. Long enough that when I called her late, which was always, I knew exactly how many rings it took before she picked up. Usually 3. That night, half of 1. "You're alive," she said, before I'd even said hello. "Barely." "That bad?" "You have no idea." I should explain how we met, because people always want to know, and the truth is dumber than whatever you're imagining. 6 years ago, I just moved into a building off Colfax, the kind of place where the heat worked when it felt like it. And one morning in February, I was standing under the awning out front, waiting for a bus that was apparently never coming. In a downpour that had turned into something closer to a personal attack, Tessa came out of the lobby with one of those collapsible umbrellas that immediately collapsed in the wrong direction, swore at it loud enough that an old man across the street laughed, and then looked at me, soaked, and said, "We can either both stand here being miserable, or you can be miserable under half of this with me." That was the whole thing. We split a broken umbrella to the bus stop, figured out we lived 4 floors apart, and by the time the 15 finally showed up, she'd already decided we were going to be friends. The way some people just decide things and you find out later, you didn't get a vote. After that, it was diner runs at midnight, when neither of us could sleep, the place on Broadway with the bottomless coffee and the waitress who knew our orders. It was me helping her haul 50-pound sacks of flour up the back stairs of the bakery before she could afford someone to do it for her. It was her sitting on my couch eating my cereal and critiquing whatever I was mixing, because I do audio for a living. Mostly podcasts and the occasional local band that thinks it's about to be famous, and Tessa had opinions about sound, the way she had opinions about everything, which is to say loudly and usually correctly. It was phone calls, so many phone calls. On bad days, good days. Days when nothing was wrong, and one of us just didn't feel like being the only person awake in our apartment. People assumed. Of course they did. Her mom assumed. My sister assumed. Every single Thanksgiving with the subtlety of a car alarm. And I always said the same thing. That no, it wasn't like that. That Tessa was my best friend and that was somehow rarer and better than the alternative everyone kept trying to hand us. I said it so many times I stopped hearing how rehearsed it sounded. What I didn't notice, or didn't let myself notice, was that I was the only one of us doing the denying. Tessa never said it wasn't like that. She'd just go quiet, or change the subject, or do that thing where she smiled at the floor instead of at me. I told myself that was nothing. I told myself a lot of things. So I didn't think twice about calling her that night, after a date that had somehow managed to be worse than no date at all. Her name was Bianca. We'd matched on an app, and she'd spent most of dinner explaining to me, unprompted, why she didn't believe in tipping, while a teenager refilled our water glasses 6 times. I'd paid $40 for a plate of gnocchi and a lecture on the moral failings of the service economy. $40, Tessa repeated, and I could hear her grinning. For gnocchi. For the privilege of watching someone stiff a kid on a Tuesday, yeah. Did you say anything? I left the kid 40 on my own card on the way out. There was a pause, just a beat too long, and then she said, quieter, "Of course you did," in a voice I didn't have a category for yet. I filled it in as teasing. I was wrong about almost everything that night, so why not that too? I could hear her moving around her kitchen while we talked. The squeak of the oven door she kept meaning to fix, the clatter of a baking sheet, the little exhale she always did when she leaned back against the counter. It was such an ordinary call. That's the part I keep coming back to. It was the most ordinary call in the world right up until it wasn't. I think I'm done, I told her, peeling off my coat by the door. With the apps. With all of it. I'm officially retiring. You said that in October. This time I mean it. You said that in October too. I laughed and leaned against my own counter, mirroring her without realizing it. The way I'd apparently been doing for 6 years. Honestly, what would I even do without you to debrief to? The line went quiet. Not dead. Just that specific kind of quiet that means a question went somewhere it wasn't supposed to go. I noticed it and didn't know what I was noticing. Tess? I'm here, she said. Then, lighter than the moment, like she was stepping back from a ledge. You'd survive. You'd probably even date someone who tips. Low bar. You'd be amazed how many people can't clear it. I smiled at nothing. Night, Tess. Night. And then I made the mistake that turned out to be the best thing I ever accidentally did. I pulled the phone away from my ear and went to hang up, my thumb already moving, except the screen didn't go where I expected, and in the half-second of fumbling I heard her voice again. Smaller now, farther from the phone, like she'd set it down on the counter and forgotten the line was still open. She wasn't talking to me. There was another voice in the room with her, a woman's, warm and dry, and it took me a second to place it as Gwen, her oldest friend. The one from her hometown who came through Denver every couple of months and crashed on Tessa's pullout. They'd been right there together the whole call. Tessa on the phone with me. Gwen sitting at the counter, and I'd never had any idea. I should have hung up. I knew it even as I didn't. I stood there with the phone pressed back to my ear hard enough to hurt. He left the kid $40, Tessa was saying. And there was a sound in her voice I'd never once heard her use about me. A kind of helpless tenderness, like the words cost her something. He doesn't even think about it. He just does stuff like that. Do you understand how exhausting that is? Gwen said something I couldn't catch. Because then I have to sit here, Tessa went on, and pretend I'm just happy he had a bad date. Pretend I'm not doing the math on how I'd have been a better one. He calls me Gwen. Every single time it falls apart, he calls me. And I get to be the consolation prize he doesn't even know he's holding. Something in my chest pulled tight and would not let go. Gwen's voice came again. Gentler, a question in it. And then Tessa, in a voice so plain and so bare that it scared me more than anything she could have shouted, said, Because I'm in love with him. I've been in love with him for years, and I am so tired of waiting around to see if he ever wakes up. I can't be his best friend forever and call it enough. I can't. I said her name before I made the decision to. Tessa. The silence after that was a different animal entirely. Not the comfortable kind we'd built over 6 years of midnight diners. This one had teeth. I heard a chair scrape fast. The panic scuffle of someone realizing the floor isn't where they left it. And then Gwen's voice, low and urgent. And then nothing. And then Tessa, right up against the phone now. Breathless. You were still on the line. It wasn't a question. There was nothing to answer. Yeah, I said. My voice came out wrong, scraped thin. Oh my God, barely a whisper. Oh my God, how much of that did you? All of it. The sound she made then, this small wounded laugh with no humor in it, is something I'll hear for the rest of my life. Okay, she said. Okay. Great. This is okay. I could picture her exactly. Free hand pressed to her forehead, eyes shut, the way she stood when an order came back wrong and the morning was already on fire. Tessa, who once talked the health inspector out of a citation, who could charm a refund out of a brick wall, who walked into every room like she'd been personally invited. Completely undone. I can explain, she said, which we both knew was nonsense, and she knew it faster than I did because she added, almost immediately, no. I can't. There's nothing to explain. You heard it. It's exactly what it sounded like. Tess, can we just forget it? Please. Can we pretend the call dropped and you didn't hear any of that and I'll see you Thursday like always and we never? No. The word came out harder than I meant it to, and it stopped her cold. What? She said. I looked around my apartment, like the right answer might be taped to the fridge between the takeout menu and the photo of the two of us at our bakery's opening, both of us covered in flour, her laughing at something I'd said that I couldn't remember anymore. The answer wasn't on the fridge. It had been sitting in my chest for years, apparently, just waiting for somebody to knock something loose. I'm not pretending I didn't hear it, I said. I'm not doing the thing where we smile and bury it and act normal on Thursday. Not this one. I can't. Why not? Her voice was so careful it almost broke. Why not, Cole? And that was the thing, wasn't it? She'd said my name like it was a door she wasn't sure she was allowed to open, and I'd spent 6 years standing on the other side of it pretending I didn't live there. Because I think I've been asking myself the wrong question for a really long time, I said. A breath. What question? Why nobody ever measures up. I started moving without deciding to, pacing my own kitchen, suddenly unable to hold still. Every time I go out with someone, somewhere around the second drink I start narrating it in my head. Like, oh, Tessa's gonna think this part is funny. Tessa's gonna have a field day with what this guy ordered. I've been on dates, and the best part of every single one of them was the phone call to you afterward. And I told myself that was just us. That was just us. That's what best friends are. I never once let the thought finish. There was a long quiet, but it wasn't the kind with teeth anymore. It was the kind where someone is listening so hard they've stopped breathing. Are you saying this because you feel sorry for me? She said. Flat. Bracing. Because if that's what this is, I need you to stop. I will literally never recover, but I need you to stop. I'm not. Cole. Tessa. The worst part of hearing what you said wasn't that it surprised me. I stopped pacing. My hand was shaking a little and I didn't know why. The worst part was that it didn't. It just made everything make sense all at once and I felt like an idiot for needing it spelled out. I heard her sit down. Or maybe slide down against the cabinets the way she did. What do we do now? She said. And it came out so young, so unsure, that it didn't sound like her at all. I didn't think about it. I'm coming over. What? No, it's almost midnight. You don't have to. I'm not having this conversation to a phone you forgot to hang up. I was already grabbing my coat off the hook, already looking for the keys I dropped in the bowl by the door 90 seconds in an entire lifetime ago. I've done 6 years of this through a phone. I'm done. A sound came through the line that I realized after a second was her laughing. Shaky and disbelieving and wet around the edges. You are unbelievable. You've known that since the umbrella. And yet, she said, just like that. And yet, 2 words she could level me with. She lived 11 minutes away by car, 8 if the lights cooperated. I made it in 7. I don't remember the drive. I remember snow had started while I was inside, the fine, dry kind Denver gets in February, and I remember running the last half block from where I parked because I couldn't make myself wait for the elevator, and I remember standing outside her door with my heart going like I'd sprinted a mile, knowing she was on the other side of it and not knowing what either of us was about to become. I knocked. Gwen opened it, took one look at my face, grabbed her coat off the back of a chair, and said, I'm going to go get a very large coffee that takes about 45 minutes, and slipped past me into the hall with the efficiency of a woman who had clearly been briefed. I heard her say, low on her way out, don't screw this up, both of you. And then the stairwell door, and then it was just me and the apartment, and Tessa standing in the middle of it, in an oversized gray sweatshirt and flannel pants, her hair down, her face pink and blotchy in a way I'd never seen, because Tessa did not let people see her cry, ever. Not once in 6 years. For a second, neither of us said anything. We just looked at each other across her tiny living room, the lamp on by the couch, one mug in the drying rack, the radiator ticking. Everything exactly the way it always was and nothing about it the same. This is the single most humiliating night of my entire adult life, she said finally. You still look better than I do? That's not helping. Wasn't trying to help. It's just true. Her mouth did something complicated, half a laugh, fighting with everything else. Why are you here, Cole? I came a few steps into the room. Because I owe you an apology 6 years overdue, and I didn't want to give it to you with a kitchen counter between us. You don't owe me. I made you wait. That stopped her. You sat through every bad date, every dumb story, every 2 a.m. call where I cried about somebody who wasn't worth your patience, and you never said a word, because saying it would have cost you me. And I let you because some part of me liked having you that close without having to be brave about it. That's the apology. I'm sorry it took you forgetting to hang up the phone for me to figure out something you already knew. She wrapped her arms around herself. The radiator ticked. That's somehow not the worst apology I've ever gotten, she said, but her voice had gone soft and thin. I mean it. I know you do. That's the problem. She looked up at me, and her eyes were doing the thing glassy, on the edge. It would be so much easier if you didn't mean it. I could be mad at you, and we could get over it, and I could go back to being fine. I don't think I want you to be fine, I said. I think I want you. I watched it land, watched her actually hear it, the way you can sometimes see a sentence reach somebody. Her face did this thing I'd never seen it do, this opening, this terrified hope. You can't just say that, she whispered. I just did. Cole. I think I've known for a long time. I took another step, closing the space until there wasn't much of it left. I just kept hiding behind the fact that you were already mine. Best friend, neighbor, the person I call. If I never looked straight at it, I never had to risk it. And that was the coward's version of loving you, and I did it for 6 years, and I'm sorry. A tear went down her cheek, and she didn't bother wiping it, which from Tessa was practically a confession all its own. I meant what I said, she told me, on the phone. All of it. I know. I've been in love with you for so long, I forgot what it felt like not to be. I huffed out something that wasn't quite a laugh. Yeah, well, looks like I'm the one running late. Story of my life lately. That got her. A real laugh broke out of her, surprised, helpless, and the second it did, the whole room let go of whatever it had been holding. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth like she couldn't believe she was allowed to be this happy. Like she was waiting for someone to tell her the floor wasn't real. You drove over here in the snow, she said. I ran the last block. You ran. She shook her head, still laughing, still crying a little, the two of them all tangled up. 6 years of me thinking I'd have to carry this to my grave, and you ran a block in the snow. In socks, almost. I forgot shoes were a thing for a second there. You did not. I did. Caught myself in the hall. She laughed harder, and I closed the last of the distance, and I lifted my hand to her face slow enough that she could have stepped back if she wanted to. She didn't step back. She leaned in, so I kissed her. Careful at first. The way you touch something you've wanted so long, you half don't trust it's real, and then not careful at all. She tasted like the coffee she should not have been drinking at midnight, and she made a small sound against my mouth that undid whatever was left of me. When we finally pulled apart, she stayed close, her forehead against mine, both of us a little wrecked, both of us grinning like fools. Well, she said, that definitely changed everything. You're the one who forgot to hang up. Best mistake I've made all year. She pulled back just enough to look at me, and there was something so unguarded in her face that I had to remember how to breathe. I had a whole speech, you know. For if you ever found out, months of it. Very dignified. Very mature. What happened to it? You ran a block in the snow and it just kind of left my head. We didn't sleep that night. Not for any scandalous reason. Just because there were 6 years of conversation that had suddenly been allowed to exist. And we sat on her pull-out couch with the lamp on and untangled all of it. Every quiet thing we'd both been carrying. She told me about the night 2 years ago when she almost said something and chickened out at the door of my apartment. Stood there for 10 minutes and then told me she'd just come to borrow a phone charger. I told her about the date I'd ended early because the woman across from me laughed at something and it was the wrong laugh. It wasn't hers, and I'd gone home and called her and never understood why. Gwen came back around 1 in the morning, took one look at the two of us sitting too close on the couch, said, "Oh, thank God, finally," and went straight to bed without another word. In the morning the snow had stopped and the city was that bright, washed kind of quiet, and Tessa made coffee, black, because it wasn't 2 in the afternoon yet, and she stood at the counter in the same gray sweatshirt, and I sat on a stool and watched her. And the strangest part was how unstrange it felt. Like the world had finally agreed to be the shape it had always actually been. She caught me staring and threw a dish towel at my head. "Stop looking at me like that," she said. "You're going to make it weird." "It's already weird. We made it weird at midnight." "Good point." She came around the counter and stood between my knees, and I put my hands on her waist like I'd been allowed to do it for years, like it was nothing, like it was everything. I keep waiting to feel embarrassed, she said. About the phone. About all of it. And that hasn't shown up yet. She tilted her head. I think I used it all last night. Here's the part nobody tells you about getting the thing you didn't know you wanted. It doesn't feel like fireworks, not after the first night. It feels like the volume on your whole life going up half a notch. I still call her at the end of every day. Except now she answered with, "Hey, you," instead of, "You're alive." And now the calls were the best part of my day instead of the part I told myself didn't count for anything. The bakery still smelled like cardamom and burned sugar. The diner waitress still knew our orders, except now she stopped asking when we were going to figure it out because we finally had. People still misread us sometimes. Strangers mostly. They see how easy we are with each other, how much we laugh, and they assume we just started dating, that it's all fresh and new, and we let them think it. Because the real story is harder to explain and a little bit embarrassing and entirely ours. 6 years of me calling her after every wrong person, never once asking why none of them stuck, until one night she forgot to hang up the phone and her friend happened to be sitting in her kitchen, and I happened to be standing in my socks too slow to end a call. And she said out loud the one thing she'd spent half a decade making sure I'd never hear. I think about that sometimes. About how close I came to never knowing. Half a second on a phone, one or the other of us a little faster. And I'm still the guy who calls his best friend after bad dates and never wonders why the best part of his night is always the same person on the other end of the line. It scares me, honestly, how thin the margin was. But she didn't hang up. And I didn't either. And a woman I almost spent my whole life calling my best friend is asleep next to me right now while I tell you this. And she snores a little, which she will deny to your face. And she steals the covers. And she takes her coffee black until 2 and then ruins it with cream. And I would not change one single thing about the dumb, slow, lucky way we got here. So if you'd been standing in your kitchen that night holding the phone, hearing the one thing you were never meant to hear about the person who'd been right there the whole time, what would you have done? Would you have run the block? Tell me in the comments. And if this got to you even a little, you know where the like button is. And I'll see you in the next one. The margin scares me more than anything else about that night. Half a second on a phone. One of us a little faster with a thumb. That's the whole difference between the life I'm living now and the one where I'm still calling Tessa after every wrong person and never asking myself why the best part of my night keeps being the same voice on the line. I used to think love was something that arrived. Like weather, like luck. I don't think that anymore. I think most of it is built quietly, and the small decisions you make about who you choose to be when nobody's grading you. Because here's what actually happened, underneath the lucky accident. Tessa didn't just wait 6 years. She waited well. She kept showing up at the diner, kept hauling her own grief up the back stairs of that bakery, kept being decent to me even while it cost her, and she never once tried to manipulate me into seeing her. That kind of patience isn't softness. It's a spine. It's the strength to hold something heavy for a long time without setting it down on the person who couldn't carry their share yet. And when the truth finally got loose, she didn't lie about it to make the moment easier. She told me it was exactly what it sounded like, honesty, even when honesty is the most humiliating thing in the room. My part is harder to be proud of, but it taught me more. For 6 years, I knew something and refused to look at it, because looking meant risk and not looking meant I got to keep her without ever being brave. That's not innocence. That's a kind of cowardice dressed up as friendship, and the cost of it was Tessa's years. The thing that finally changed wasn't that I got smarter. It was that I stopped lying to myself long enough to act, and then I actually acted. I drove. I ran the block. The knowing was nothing until it became doing. So if you take one thing from Cole and Tessa and the phone she forgot to hang up, let it be this. Pay attention to the people who feel like home, and be honest with yourself about why. When you finally see the truth, have the decency not to bury it again to stay comfortable, and then have the nerve to move, even in the snow, even in your socks, because the right thing, known and never done, is just a regret with better lighting. Gwen said it on her way out the door that night. Half a joke, half a command. Don't screw this up, both of you. I think about that more than she'd ever guess. We almost did. We almost let easy be true. The only reason we didn't is that somewhere along the way we both decided, separately and finally together, that the person we wanted was worth being brave for.